the man, he's the myth, he's the legend, he's the scientist with all the answers to all the questions. It's time for another episode of Alex's Science Corner.
Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you. No, please, thank you. Just makes editing the extra clapping harder when it keeps on going like that.
What's going on in the wide, wide world of science, my friend?
Story number one is paleontologists have found an ancestor or an ancient four-legged whale. Whales are cetaceans, whales and dolphins, and we know that the earliest traces we've got from them are land mammals from about 50 million years ago. They came from small four-hooved land animals.
So they did the reverse thing.
Right,
Instead
they went
of
from
coming out of the water, they went into the water.
Yeah, they came out of the water, and then
became a land
millions of
animal.
years later, they went
back into the water. Okay.
Right. So what they found in Peru was a ancestor of the whale. Now, one of the things about this is that the original ancestors of the whale were coming from Asia, and so these animals went across Asia and Africa, and then at that point they had developed into swimming creatures. So they had hooves, they had legs, but their tail had developed into like an otter's tail, flattened tail. And they had been able to cross over the sea from Africa to South America. And these fossils...
That was a long trip.
Well, at 42
And boy, my arms are tired.
42 million years ago...
They probably would have said, my tail is tired.
Their legs are tired.
Yeah.
42 million years ago, the distance between the two was half, but still it's a long, long distance. They found these fossils in Peru. So they were able to find these really interesting fossils. This is a transition fossil from when it was still swimming. It could swim long distances, but could still walk on land. It had webbed feet, but it had hooves on its legs. So it was a land and sea creature at that time.
I'm curious, do they know if it diverged, if two different species came out of this one species? One became stayed a land creature, and one became the whale as we know
There's
today.
a possibility. Right now, they haven't got anything specific. I mean, if you're trying to trace down whales, you're tracing down the whales. If you're tracing down the land side of it, then you're talking about the animals that would have stayed in Africa, like hippos and rhinos. They're related also, but again, they would have been farther back. But whatever was the parent of them will have split into the creatures that eventually became whales, and will split into the hippos and rhinos on the other side of it.
So you're saying the split would have occurred before they crossed the ocean, not after?
Correct. I mean, if something else happened after it came onto the ocean, they're not... I haven't seen anything, or they haven't
to indicate
related
that
anything.
that happened.
Right. It looks like that whatever that was just kept on developing into more of a sea creature as it went on. And any variations of that just didn't do as well. So the variation that did do well were the ones that eventually went into whales. Second story is another paleontological story. If you remember 2 weeks ago's Science Corner, I talked about the asteroid that landed 65 million years ago and caused mass extinctions. And they also believed in the story from 2 weeks ago was the shockwaves caused volcanoes on the other side of the planet. Well, paleontologists in North Dakota have discovered a fossil bed that it looks like was created from the asteroid impact. Now, the asteroid itself happened in Chicxulub, Mexico, which is a small outcropping into the Gulf of Mexico. This particular fossil site was either a riverbed or river seabed in North Dakota that they found. And the reason why they are determining that is part of that impact, or what this was caused by the impact, is the fossil fish that they're finding in this impact. There's a lot of them. They all died literally at the same time. They found these micronodules that are glass spheres that are caused by ash, rock ash. So when the asteroid impacted, the heat caused all this dust, and the dust is solidified rock turning into glass. And they found this ash inside of the fish's stomachs. And the fish were covered by the layer of dust and debris. So what it looks like happened is the impact caused shock waves that caused earthquakes near where the fish were, that caused tidal waves and sediment to be moved around. And so these fish got buried in the tidal waves of all the sediment being moved around.
So it hit in Mexico or New Mexico, did you say?
Mexico.
Hits in Mexico. So did a piece of it break off and then
there's debris. There's
in North Dakota?
No. When it hit, it's you see how there's all that dust. When you see a volcano, you see those smoke clouds, the billowing smoke clouds. That's what we're talking about here. It's not like a peace land in North Dakota. It's this dust
so
and
it's
debris
the debris
spread.
Once it hit,
Right.
This debris traveled that far.
Correct.
Okay.
And the debris traveled that far. Plus, the shock waves may have caused earthquakes in North Dakota, and those earthquakes may have caused tidal waves near North Dakota. Not just from the tidal wave that happened from the impact itself, but there have been local tidal waves from earthquakes near North Dakota that will have caused the fish to be buried.
So are the fish from Mexico?
No, the fish are in North Dakota. Yes.
Okay.
The fish are in North Dakota, and they were covered by a layer of ash
Debris
and
that was
debris
from
that
the-
they find the dust, asteroid dust. And if you
And
remember,
that's why they were in the fish's stomach.
well, yes, and over the top of it.
Okay.
And I think I mentioned there's an element called iridium. It's a type of metal. It's extremely rare on the Earth, but very common in asteroids. And that is the iridium layer that I've talked about before, the KPG boundary, which defines dinosaurs below that layer, known dinosaurs above that layer. And they found these fish in that layer.
Okay.
And so that's why they think that these fish were killed by the asteroid impact that wiped out all the dinosaurs.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is. It really is. I'm impressed that the ash, traveled that far.
Well, the ash travels all over the place.
Even volcanoes now.
Small volcano. I mean, there's a volcano in Iceland that happened a couple years ago. That cut off all air traffic in Europe.
I do remember that. And
that was like about 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I do remember years ago there was a British Airlines jet that almost crashed because of the stuff way up in the atmosphere from a volcano that was pretty far away.
And it's very, very fine dust.
Yeah,
but
and it got into the engines, and these guys barely got the jet back.
Yeah, and because you're talking about glass, very fine glass that will rip an engine apart. You don't think of it that bad, but it is incredibly abrasive. And when you're talking about fine moving metal parts, like in an aircraft engine, you get something that starts ripping that metal apart, like sand or something that's getting inside of the little gears. The gears are going to just shred themselves. And so the fact that they're able to get the engines going and get out of there, because it also will cut off the air intake and the jets will be starved for air. So those engines will have been ruined when they landed. And
yeah, I remember they barely made it back.
Yeah.
All right.
That's why they don't fly. When there's a volcano,
learned. Yeah,
that's why air travel was cut off for like about a month and a half in Europe from a volcano in Iceland.
All right. Anything else to add?
Nope.
Okay. All right. What was that? You're making a weird face over there. All
my
right.
fish face. It's my fish face.
All right.
We're talking about, some.
All right. Out there in Radio Land.
It's been a fishy science corner.
It has. If you want to contact Alex about these stories or anything else science related, you can call him right now at 203-837-9924.